Norman and Derek are going to the fire station with all the other pioneers, cause nobody in this forsaken town of Pontypandy has realized how much of a safety hazard Norman is. Norman tells his mom he was polishing his shoes, but Derek blows him up on the spot and says he was playing a fireman video game. Probably the one where you let the whole neighborhood burn.
I've told you about playing that game. You'll go balk alive.
If you don't want him playing it, then why did you even buy it for him? That's like getting mad at DW for giving her your model plane. Dillis points out that being a real fireman is different from being a virtual one, but unlike video games, you can't just hit restart in real life when Norman turns a gas leak into a fireworks show. Norman gets all cocky and says that he doesn't even need to go to the fire station to get his badge because of the video game, which is like saying you're ready to perform brain surgery because you played Operation without buzzing. Steele lets everyone know about the pioneers coming over, as if he's not already having a stroke just thinking about Norman near actual fire equipment. Elvis asks if he can help, and Steele shuts that off faster than Norman's father becoming a thing. Seriously, that man disappeared harder than Elvis's brain cells. Steele puts Elvis on cooking duty, and based off his expression, he's absolutely thrilled. The pioneers arrive, and Trevor gets out before Norman can even breathe in his direction. Norman claims he's so good about being a firefighter that Sam will actually let him be a part of the team. Even Derek knows that's a load of crap. Steele warns Elvis about Norman's arrival, and Elvis makes sure to protect the pie like his life depends on it, cause that's the only normal thing he can do without setting the place ablaze. Penny shows everyone how to slide down the pole. Everyone gets amazed, and Norman attempts to show off to everyone. Sam throws that idea away in a jiffy and points out that there won't be any injuries, or police being called. But Norman completely understands. Steele points out the skills firefighters need to learn, like driving a fire truck and keeping real-life fire hazards hundreds of feet away from any human interaction. Norman claims that it's easy to drive a fire truck. I have a feeling where this is going. They sneak off without getting caught and get into Jupiter without the need for a key. Steele says that firemen need to look out for any emergencies at all times. Norman is able to get Jupiter into the streets and somehow doesn't crash into anything or anyone. Dillis gets memorized by Norman driving until she realizes that Norman's driving. Steele and Sam get informed about Norman's hijack, and Sam is able to save Norman in the brink of time. Norman gets left off without getting taken away by police and gets another meaningless talking to from Sam. Bro's lucky he's not living in Florida. Norman and Derek don't get their badges, but will have to impress Gordon Ramsay by cooking a cottage pie, which is even worse for reasons you know of. Let's summarize. Norman spent the whole episode being a complete menace and thinking he knew everything about being a fireman. When Sam forbid him from sliding down the pole, he took Jupiter for a joyride throughout Pontypandy and somehow didn't crash into anything or anyone. He was let off without a warning, and his punishment was not getting his badge, which just proves that you can commit full-blown felonies in this town, and the worst you'll get is mild disappointment and a half warning. Norman can pay the price! Fireman Sam is setting up a smoke alarm for Dillis. A little too late if you ask me. That house has had more red flags than a Twitter thread. Norman decides to make life 10 times harder by destroying the house with his weak soccer kicks. I've seen more force in a Nerf gunfight. Dillis tells her red-hair firemaniac to go play outside. Norman says it's too windy out there. Yeah, and I suppose it's too resisting to yeet into oncoming traffic. Not that there is any. Shame, really. Sam fixes the alarm and tells Dillis to break it if necessary. Oh, it definitely will be necessary, alright. Instead of finding something else to do, Norman decides to sneak back into the shop, and what do you know? He makes the frickin' fire alarm go off. Because of course he does. Sam arrives at the scene and is instantly able to connect the dots to this mystery that shouldn't even be a thing. What a shocker. Meanwhile, Bronvin and Charlie are cleaning up trash, which is ironic given that that's what everyone else has been doing since Norman learned to walk. She also reveals how foxes are so foxy. Which, how does that make any sense? The ADHD fire breather returns home and asks his mom where his ball's at. Dillis tells Norman why it's hidden, and he somehow doesn't understand why. Instead of coming clean, he chooses to stay hidden to the truth and act like new things are faulty. But unlike new things, Norman was already faulty the day he was born. Norman this time decides to unintentionally set off the fire alarm to prove a point that nobody gives a crap about.
You're joking. Not another one? Oh, for God's sake, I can't stand it.
Sam returns to the shop and instantly catches on to Norman's little BS game. He reminds Norman of the story of the boy who cried wolf. Too bad Norman wasn't the boy in the story, otherwise this show would have ended ages ago. Despite this, Norman continues to deny everything and defend himself. Dillis says screw that and grabs Norman for the first time ever. Good riddance. Bronvin tries to get her first victim when Charlie comes in and saves him. Bronvin says she was trying to make friends. Sure. Like you were offering Mike some lemonade-like friends. The fox gets into the shop and Norman and Dillis react like it's life or death. Dillis can surely call firemen. That worked out well. Dillis tells Norman to get his ball from behind the counter and is able to get the alarm turned on. Norman apologizes for his mistake and admits he set off the fire alarm to get his ball back, which would be amazing if it wasn't said so awfully late. Sam is about ready to put Arson Freckleface in his place when he points out the wolf that was gonna eat them. One can dream. Sam corrects the pair and says it's injured.
Norman finally apologizes for the first time in his life, which is surprisingly genuine given that we never see Norman pull another fire alarm following this. But that's only because he graduated from false alarms to full-blown fires, giving those alarms a real reason to exist. Let's summarize. Norman spent the entire episode ignoring his mom's orders and setting off the fire alarm twice. He refused to take responsibility and tried to gaslight everyone into thinking the alarm was broken. It wasn't until he thought a fox was about to eat him that he finally apologized. Not because he meant it, but because he panicked. Fear did what parenting couldn't. And even then, the apology meant nothing because shortly after, Norman moved on to starting actual fires. Norman can pay the price.
Norman Price is making a bootleg James Bond movie with his emotionally fragile band of backup dancers, friends. Because when you're under 13 and can't watch PG-13 movies, the obvious solution is to ruin them yourself with a shaky camcorder and zero acting ability. Norman, who was born a wuss, uses his stunt double, aka James, funny enough, to let Mandy squirt all over him. With her water gun. You didn't let me finish, you pervs. Fortunately, this ends up backfiring and the water squirts all over Norman. Good. It's about time this arsonist got baptized. Back at the fire station, Sam is checking off the mindless amount of things done for the day while using his butt to close all the drawers. Don't question it. Sam's about to watch the ultimate Norman Can Pay the Price compilation when Penny stops him to watch her favorite actor,
Ryan McChin.
Sounds like someone's got a crush on a jawline so sharp it could slice through the Fireman Sam budget. Norman is directing a ski scene. In hot weather, at the park. Genius. Norman again uses his friend James to take all the blows for him. And let me just say this, if you're gonna use a stunt double, at least make him look like the main actor himself. Otherwise, it just looks like Norman explodes into a completely different child every time the scene gets remotely interesting. James somehow ends up hanging from the top of a tree, clinging on like his life depends on it. Which, to be fair, it kind of does. Die! 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 Sam shows up and saves him in record time, which would be cool if Pontypandy wasn't such a danger hazard. Sam politely asks Norman to keep the stunts danger free, and surely Norman will give Sam a "oh, just forget it." Sam once again chases James around Pontypandy and saves him before he gets turned into fish fingers. Sam tells Norman this is getting to be too much, which Norman himself is already too much to deal with. Norman promises to Sam that this last scene will be danger-free. Yeah. Okay then, Norman. Hannah reveals herself to be the main antagonist of the movie as Mandy ties Norman to the chair. Unfortunately, Norman uses his stunt double again and tells him to burn through the rope with a magnifying glass. Oh, that should work out great! Sam rushes over to Joe's garage and saves James for the third time in this episode. Sam tells Joe to not leave oily rags out for flamed hair menaces. Speaking of which, Sam chews Norman out for spectacular carelessness and tells him to always have an adult supervising him when making movies. Which is hilarious, because even with supervision, Norman will still find a way to put everyone around him in danger. Norman's craptastic movie is finally shown to the world, and everyone enjoys it. Sarcastically, Dillis indirectly punishes Norman by revealing his middle name is actually Stanley.
No, it's not Norman. It's Stanley.
Well, no wonder your dad left you. The episode ends off with Sam quoting the man himself.
The name's Sam. Fireman Sam.
Let's summarize. Norman spent the whole episode using his poor friend James for pointless, dangerous stunts. He refused to listen to Sam's warnings and went as far as to tying James in a chair like he just kidnapped him. And even when he was called out at the end, he was not punished nor charged for his crimes, although at least he was embarrassed by his mom towards the end. Norman can pay the price! Norman is strutting down the sidewalk like he's auditioning for America's Next Top Disaster before getting absolutely obliterated by the smoke machine. I guess Joe's starting to realize you're not just a klutz, you're an arsonist with commitment issues. Norman announces he's preparing for his big disco dance tonight and claims Mike and Joe have personally invited him to open the show. But let's be honest, they just want a pre-show train wreck to make the main act look classy. The Boo cosplayer then shows up to dance with Norman, while Mrs. Chen leaves Norman yet again to be her babysitter. Which, once again, why are you trusting your child to a kid who started more fires in a medieval village siege?
Well, disco boy, looks like you've got yourself a dance partner.
I think we should have a talk on what's acceptable and what the word consent means. Cause that's just mentally wrong for a 3-year-old to want to be around a flamed hair arsonist. And who knows what he'll try to do to her off camera. Thankfully, Norman wants the exact opposite with her and states this will ruin his spectacular moment. Which your presence itself already does the trick.
What the hell is even that?
Sam is pointing out the things he needs to finish at the fire station right before being completely blasted by the fire station dummy. Turns out, Elvis says he's practicing the big lift for the disco dance finale. Frankly, the only thing that needs a big lift is Elvis's mental health. This is the same guy who once tried to feed his dog chocolate. Need I say more? Norman wants absolutely nothing to do with Lily, so he decides to hide behind some boxes. He whispers to Joe not to tell anyone where he is, so naturally, Joe tells everyone where he's at.
Don't worry, Norman, I won't tell Lily you're hiding under the decks.
Nice job, Jimmy. Bronvyn comes out with the cake, and no, not that cake. Seriously, don't tell Mike about that one unless you want a whole new kind of disaster, as Norman continues to run away from her like it's life or death. Because, well, he's not exactly ready for that kind of commitment. Sarah tells Norman to grow up and cut that crap off. He tries hiding under a table and gets caught instantly. Like, use your brain, Norman. Sam is starting to get sick of seeing Elvis's craptastic dance failures, which again, Elvis's mental health needs a big, if not massive, lift. Penny tells Elvis to get on his knees, and Elvis takes that way too literally. Ellie ends up diving headfirst into Station Officer Steele and somehow doesn't end up concussing him on the spot.
I'm thinking you bent your knees a little too much, Elvis.
You think, Penny? It's now Norman's turn to be the star of the show. And he does, but for all the wrong reasons. He decides to set up the smoke machine as a distraction for Lily to not recognize him, but it ends up blinding everyone and putting the whole fish cafe on fire, ultimately delaying Bronvyn's plans of baiting Mike with her distraction and questionable disco pants. Norman's plan didn't even matter at all as Lily still managed to find him, meaning all of this was caused for nothing but your instincts acting up. You really need to get a grip on those, right alongside your pyromaniac tendencies.
Oh no! Better call the fire and rescue team!
I'm sorry, Mike, but what in the blue hell is that face? The firefighters sprint into action and get the fire taken care of, as per usual. Sam saves Bronwyn, which probably deflated Mike even more than he already was. Sam scolds Norman for setting off the smoke machine, and Penny points out this could have been avoided if he just danced with Lily. Which, if you put it like that, every problem Norman Price has caused up until this point can easily be avoided. Norman gives off another half-hearted apology and accepts the fate he's been set to face. Which, for someone who despises a 3-year-old as their dance partner, you sure have no problem with it. Elvis and Ellie prepare for the big lift. Elvis unsurprisingly fails to live up to his part, and Sam is somehow able to catch her in time before she breaks her skull. Uh-oh, I see where this is going. Lily ends up tackling Norman to the ground and decides to eat the cake all over his face. Gross. And we thankfully never managed to see Bronvyn in her disco trousers, because she probably would have scarred several kids and caused a scene with a certain plumber trying to snog her on the spot. Let's summarize. Norman tried to make the entire disco dance revolve around him and him only. Instead of asking Lily to dance with him after his intro, he tried to avoid her at all costs and even went as far as to setting off the smoke machine, which did the complete opposite to stop her finding him in the process. He got everyone blinded by the smoke, which caused a fire in the cafe that could have easily killed Bronvyn. And even though Sam did scold him for what he did, he never turned Norman in for his actions, which proves to everyone that the only place where you won't be arrested for committing arson is Pontypandy. So, Mrs. Chen can pay the price for leaving her daughter by herself yet again with Norman. Elvis can pay the price for failing to do the simplest of tasks that nearly concussed Ellie. Lily Chen can pay the price for making her primary goal to stalk Norman whenever she had the chance to. And of course, for setting off the smoke machine, setting the whole fish cafe on fire, and nearly killing Bronvyn, Norman can pay the price! Norman Price has invited his cousin Derek over to watch a so-called scary zombie movie, which is funny, because honestly, Norman's history with fire is already scarier than anything on screen.
Norman, do we have to watch this? What's the matter, Derek? Are you scared?
I don't think he's exactly scared of the horror film, but more so on who he's watching it with. Derek finally stands up for himself and snatches the remote from Norman, as he'd much rather watch the history of teaspoons than any horror film. Wouldn't we all? Norman decides to get revenge on his poor cousin by scaring the living daylights out of him. I guess Derek was so scared from the sight of Norman that we actually never see him again for the rest of the episode. Again, wouldn't we all? Meanwhile, Bronvyn explains how her son ended up being the first victim of the winter bug, before the formidable deadhead makes his undeserving arrival. And is it just me, but why the hell does James look like he got blasted in the face with baby powder? Turns out, there's a new trending song, and it low-key kinda sounds like one of those early teen 2000 pop songs.
Shake up my summer go-go!
My ears burn!
Unsurprisingly, Sam is not a fan, though who could blame him? Dillis Price tells her flamed hair scumbag to pick up dinner at the Whole Fish Cafe, but Norman says he's sick. Sick in the head, more like. Dillis tells her lazy arsonist to get his arse outside and prays for his demise. Sam arrives back at the fire station, where it seems a new type of plague has taken over. Not one that rots flesh, but dignity.
Shake off my summer go-go!
Yeah, it didn't just affect Bronvyn. Norman is running over to the Whole Fish Cafe and somehow doesn't get lightning struck on him in that moment. So close. James tries to strike up a conversation, but Norman bolts faster than Dillis's limbo whenever Trevor sneezes. Turns out, he thinks James is a Pondy, which for those who are wondering what the hell that even is just a zombie in Pontypandy. Why couldn't you just said zombie, Norman? Why do you have to make the end of day sound like a children's book? Fireman Sam tries to go on with his job, but all the other firefighters just can't get that stupid song out of their heads. The song is so contagious that even Steele of all people can't help himself. Then again, this guy has tried sneaking candy apples before, so what's there to be shocked about? Norman heads over to Hannah's house, only for Joe to meet him at the door and explain that Hannah's caught it too. Before Joe can even say the word sick, Norman's already convinced she's turned into another Pondy. Now that I think about it, Norman wouldn't last 5 seconds in Shaun of the Dead. I mean, with all the running and screaming he does, strategy wouldn't even be a thought of his. Then again, has Norman ever made a good strategy before? We then get a shot of Mandy watching a zombie movie while her dad is napping his knight and marriage away on the couch. Norman is practically begging Mandy to let him in as if he's actually in danger. But even then, I wouldn't mind letting Norman get his well-deserved fate by the zombies. Unfortunately, Mandy lets Norman into her house and falls for his stupid assumptions of zombies coming after them. Which I gotta say, after all the hell Norman's put his friends through, it's surprising they haven't started calling him out on just how completely insane he is. They end up wasting their time barricading her house and runs upstairs to her bedroom. As Mandy decides to cough the slightest, that's an automatic red flag into being a zombie. Or, for Norman's standards. He locks her in the room and breaks the doorknob, which wouldn't have happened if she hadn't let him in her house in the first place. Instead of calling the fire station for help, Norman decides the best move is to blast a flare outside. And if there's one thing we know about Norman Price and fires, it's that he somehow manages to use it to make everything worse for everyone around him.
I just had a terrible dream that Norman Price threw a flare into the laundry basket and set fire to my house.
It wasn't a dream, Mike. It was real. I also find it sad that Mike isn't worried about Norman setting his house on fire again. He's probably used to it at this point. The firefighters rush over to the Flood's house, and as usual, save the day. Mandy tells Norman that she's sick, just like everyone else, and he basically started all this panicking over nothing. Norman is again let off without punishment, but honestly, just Norman having genuine fear inside of him should be enough to have him really think over his life choices. But this isn't as bad as the time he and Derek tried to steal all of the candy in Pontypandy. It's Halloween season in Pontypandy, where Sam is seen ordering 15 apples from Dillis's shop. Turns out, besides being famous for saving Norman's arse 57 times a day, he's also famous for his participation in apple bobbing, which I find weird that he puts more dedication into bobbing apples in gross disease water than actually locking this flamed hair menace behind bars. Speaking of which, Norman and Derek, who apparently recovered from amnesia and immediately decided to go back to a life of petty crime, are planning to steal all the Halloween candy in Pontypandy, because Norman Price couldn't be good for one day if his very soul depended on it.
You remember last Halloween I set fire to 3 pumpkins, so all my trick-or-treat sweets were taken away.
Wait, what? You're telling me Norman set fire to 3 pumpkins and the worst punishment he got was taking his candy away? Does juvenile detention not exist in this show or something? They decide they're going to use Norman's old go-kart to execute their plan. You know, the same go-kart that flung him straight into the sea and almost took away Pontypandy's worst danger hazard. Dillis sees right through this and tells him to shove this stupid plan straight into the abyss. But Norman promises to be extra careful.
My plan's much cleverer than that.
I feel dangerous is a better word to describe your plans. Meanwhile, back at the fire station, the crew has decided that apple bobbing is peak entertainment. Elvis is struggling so badly to grab an apple with his mouth that you start to wonder if gravity is secretly against him. Then again, this is Elvis we're talking about. The same guy who once confused dog treats for chocolate. Norman and Derek set their plan into motion, or Norman at least does. Their first target is Mike Flood, who somehow can't recognize Norman behind all those masks. Norman is able to get Mike bankrupt of candy, while Elvis is taking a sweet time trying to bob an apple, which at this point, trying to bob Elvis's infected apple should be considered a health violation. Mrs. Chen and Bronfman find out that all of the candy in Pontypandy is gone, which does not sit well with the children. And honestly, can you blame them? What's the point of going house to house if you're not getting a single piece of candy? However, it isn't all bad, as Dillis has 3 boxes of candy at her place. Norman hears about this and tells Derek to give him one big push. I have a feeling this isn't headed in a good direction. Norman completely misses his shot and heads straight into the ocean, where if I've seen this before, Fireman Sam's about to bob for Elvis-infected apples when, surprise surprise, Norman Price is stuck in the ocean and needs help.
Norman Price and his go-kart have ended up in the sea.
Hasn't that happened before?
Huh, I guess there is some continuity in this show. The fire team rushes to the sea and rescues Norman. Again. Sam calls it Norman bobbing, a game that sounds like a death wish disguised as fun. Instead of being grateful for yet another miraculous rescue, Norman mourns the soggy ruin of his candy like it's a national tragedy, and of course, walks away unpunished. Classic Norman. The episode ends with Lily giving Norman a piece of her candy, which would be considered mercy until you realize it's a custard chew, which is a candy Norman hates with a burning passion, like how we all hate Norman with a burning passion. So both of these episodes show that Norman Price can take a scary fun holiday and turn it into some miserable boring fire hazard experience. And these two episodes show a perfect example of that. So, as we always do in these videos, let's summarize. Norman spent the first episode scaring his cousin Derek for no good reason other than to watch his stupid zombie movie, which would ultimately backfire on him when his mom sent him out to get dinner. He mistaken his sick friends for being zombies, tricked Mandy into believing it as well, and went as far as to barricading her entire house. He ended up locking her in her room by breaking the doorknob, and made things 100 times worse by setting off a flare inside her house. And while the second episode isn't as danger hazard as this one, it was still pretty stupid for reasons you're about to find out. Norman chose to form a stupid plan with his cousin Derek into stealing all of the candy in Pontypandy. He was somehow able to get away with his plan, and was almost able to get away with it. Instead of accepting the candy he had, he let greed take over him into getting more candy, which backfired yet again when Norman ended up flinging straight into the ocean. But at least Norman got some sort of karma by not having any candy. And a candy he did get was a disgusting custard chew, which is probably the closest we're ever going to get to Norman being punished. So, Dillis can pay the price for not punishing her son and letting him almost kill himself. Derek can pay the price for hanging around his cousin and not keeping to himself. Mandy can pay the price for letting Norman into her house and believing his stupid lie of zombies being in Pontypandy. Mike can pay the price for falling into Norman's stupid plan and helping him take all of the candy away from the other children. Elvis can pay the price for failing the simple task of apple bobbing. And of course, for believing zombies were in Pontypandy, scaring his cousin and friends, trying to steal all of the candy in Pontypandy, and wasting a buttload of it, Norman can pay double the price.